I am Natalie Warren, 34, and my life has been built from grit, grace, and an unshakable bond with my brother James. From the moment our parents' marriage split apart into slammed doors and whispered accusations, James became my anchor, the one person who reminded me that even if the adults failed us, we could still count on each other. We worked after-school jobs to keep food on the table, we swapped shifts so one of us could study, and we swore that no matter how hard life got, we would always choose each other first. That promise carried me through years of 14-hour shifts in hospitality, through the sleepless months of renovating the failing Sapphire Grand, through building Sapphire luxury hotels and elite catering into names people whispered with admiration. And when James met Melissa, a woman from a family that measured worth in moneyed surnames and country club memberships, I tried to believe love could smooth the edges. She was all polish and practiced smiles, the kind of woman who looked at servers like they were furniture, who asked me with a smirk how it felt to work in hotels, as if ownership was servitude. James, blinded by infatuation, didn't hear the undertones. He bought the SUV he couldn't afford, adopted phrases like optics and the right crowd, and drifted from the brother who once split sandwiches with me. When he proposed to Melissa with the beach full of rose petals and a diamond big enough to catch satellites, I swallowed my unease and celebrated his joy. The wedding planning became a battlefield of expectations. Melissa and her mother Eleanor demanding reupholstered chairs, new drapes, imported flowers, and menus rewritten 15 times. James was drowning in costs he couldn't shoulder, and I stepped in the only way I knew how, with love that translated into money. $65,000, I told them. The venue and base catering are my gift. It was months of profit, but it was also a sister keeping a childhood vow. We only have each other. Planning rolled on, but something began to sour. Emails excluded me. Meetings about my own staff happened without me. I told myself it was stress, that once the vows were said, the sister who built an empire would be allowed to simply be a sister again. Then the invitations went out. Cousins posted photos of gold-foiled envelopes. Friends texted about how beautiful the calligraphy was. My mailbox stayed empty. The bridal shower passed without a word. An engagement shoot appeared online, staged in the Botanical Gardens, and my name was absent from every caption. When I saw the final seating chart for the reception and found no Natalie among the family tables, my chest turned hollow. I confronted James. He mumbled evasions about complicated guest lists and pressure. Days later, a bartender friend sent me a video of Melissa at her club, laughing with bridesmaids about the hotel girl who thinks she'll sit with family. She said my $65,000 was already spent. That night, I sat in my office, lights off, and read the venue contract like it was scripture. Section 12. Any event violating respect and integrity may be canceled at the owner's discretion. The next day, my phone rang. Victoria Hayes, the planner, crisp as a pressed suit. Miss Warren. The days after that confrontation moved like a storm cloud hovering over the Sapphire Grand. Outwardly, the planning continued. Florists delivered crates of orchids, musicians rehearsed in the gallery, chefs perfected canapes under silver domes. But inside me, there was a constant hum, part fury, part sorrow, part the quiet strength of someone who finally said no after years of yes. James called me that evening, his voice raw. Nat, I never wanted it this way. I wanted to believe him, wanted to rewind to when we were kids, counting coins on the bedroom floor, promising we would never let the world split us apart. But how do you reconcile that boy with the man who let his fiancée and her mother dictate that his only sister was not good enough to witness his vows? You signed off on it, I told him flatly. He stammered excuses about pressure, about optics, about Melissa's vision of perfection. Every word was another crack in the image of the brother I once knew. And yet, beneath it, I heard guilt, maybe even shame, and it kept me from slamming the phone down. I knew deep inside that Melissa's world had wrapped around him like ivy, choking the authenticity out of him. But the real James was still in there, somewhere, buried. The rehearsal dinner became the first test. I answered in a gown that made no apologies, deep navy silk, my grandmother's pearls, and a presence that said I was not staff, not a side note, but family. Conversations faltered when I walked in. Melissa plastered on a smile tight enough to crack porcelain, while Eleanor kept her eyes fixed on her glass of wine. Only Howard extended a hand, surprisingly gracious, as if he recognized strength, even when it was inconvenient. James hugged me, but his arms felt tentative, as though hugging me was now a political act. Guests watched curiously, whispers rising like the rustle of silk. I sat at the head table, where I belonged, ignoring Melissa's glare. The evening passed in a blur of forced pleasantries, but one thing stayed with me: the way James looked at her when she snapped at a waiter for bringing sparkling water instead of still. His eyes flickered, just for a moment, with something that looked like doubt. Later on the terrace, he joined me under the city lights. "Do you remember when we dreamed about owning skyscrapers and gardens?" he asked softly. His words carried the echo of the brother I loved. I reminded him of the fire escape nights, of promises that we only needed each other. He nodded, but his eyes were haunted. "What if I've built a life that doesn't even look like mine?" he whispered. Before I could answer, Melissa's voice cut through the night, sharp and impatient, pulling him back into her orbit. He left with an apologetic glance, and I was left with the cold knowledge that doubt had After James's declaration, the ballroom unraveled like a stage play collapsing mid-scene. Guests rose from their seats, whispering furiously. Phones lifted to capture the scandal unfolding in real time. Melissa's sobs rang sharp against the marble as Eleanor hissed threats of ruined reputations and lawsuits. Howard tried to steady them both, but even his voice shook with disbelief. Through it all, James didn't waver. His hand gripped mine like an anchor as he led me away from the chaos, past towering arrangements of orchids and the murmurs of 200 stunned witnesses. In the quiet of my office, away from the chandeliers and whispers, he sank into a chair, his shoulders heaving as if the weight of months had finally lifted. "I can't believe I just did that," he said, half laughing, half crying, staring at his trembling hands. But when the minister asked that question, all I could think of was you. How Melissa and her mother treated you, how they dismissed everything we went through, how they nearly erased you from my life. I realized if I said yes, I'd be saying yes to becoming one of them. I poured him a glass of water and sat beside him, studying the boy who once promised me sandwiches and safety, now returned as a man who had just detonated his own wedding to reclaim his soul. "You'll pay a price for this," I warned gently. "Financial, social, maybe professional." He nodded, eyes clearing. "But at least I'll be paying as myself, not as a puppet." In the days that followed, the fallout came fast. The Blakes demanded repayment for their expenses. Gossip magazines feasted on the story of the jilted bride and the construction manager who walked away. Yet beneath the noise, something remarkable happened. James began to smile again, not the stiff smile of Melissa's world, but the unguarded grin of my brother. We reinstated Sunday brunches, laughing over pancakes the way we had as kids, rebuilding piece by piece what almost crumbled under the weight of someone else's expectations. And for me, the moment became a mirror. I had spent years pouring myself into business, defining my worth by occupancy rates and Michelin stars. But standing in that ballroom, I learned that dignity doesn't come from polished silver or glowing reviews. It comes from refusing to be diminished, from saying no even when the world expects you to be silent. James reclaimed himself at the altar. I reclaimed myself in the conference room. Together, We discovered that sometimes family isn't about keeping peace at any cost. It's about drawing lines that protect love from being twisted into something unrecognizable. The days after the canceled vows felt like walking through the aftermath of a storm. Quiet streets, debris scattered, and the air heavy with things unsaid. The story spread quickly, not just among the guests, but through social circles far beyond Boston. Headlines called it the wedding that wasn't. Blogs speculated about Melissa's humiliation, and whispers painted James as reckless or brave, depending on who was speaking. Through it all, the Sapphire Grand stood tall, its marble halls untouched by scandal, because my staff carried themselves with the same dignity I demanded. They knew the truth, that what happened on that altar was less about ruined flowers and wasted champagne, and more about a man reclaiming his soul. James stayed at my apartment for the first week, too ashamed to face his own empty condo. Each morning, I'd find him on the balcony with coffee, staring at the skyline as if searching for answers among the glass towers. "I keep thinking about that moment," he confessed one morning, voice rough. "How quiet the room was, and how the only person I saw was you. I don't know what would have happened if I'd gone through with it." I told him what I believed, that marriages built on lies collapse, but the courage to stop one before it starts can save a lifetime of pain. Slowly, he began to rebuild. He returned to his construction crew, grateful for the calloused hands and honest work that tethered him back to reality. Some friends drifted away, preferring Melissa's glittering circles, but his true friends brought beer and pizza, reminding him that loyalty isn't bought with chandeliers or country club memberships. For me, the ordeal became a turning point. I realized how often I had equated generosity with silence, mistaking endurance for strength. The day I stood in that conference room, refusing to be erased, I learned that boundaries are not walls. They are doors. You choose who to let through. Months later, when James introduced me to Sarah, a city planner who looked him in the eyes instead of over his shoulder, I saw my brother glowing in a way Melissa's world had never allowed. And I knew then that the disaster had been a gift disguised in white lace and shattered vows. Sometimes life rips away what you think you want, so it can reveal what you truly need: self-respect, honesty, and the courage to demand both. 6 months after the chaos, the Sapphire Grand thrived louder than ever. Bookings surged, my catering company had a waiting list, and colleagues whispered about how I had handled the infamous non-wedding with a calm professionalism that turned scandal into strength. But beneath the polished reports and glowing reviews, the true victory wasn't in revenue. It was in rediscovering the bond with my brother that money could never buy. James had moved past the gossip columns and begun dating Sarah, the city planner who treated him with a kindness that required no performance. Their laughter over simple dinners replaced the hollow glamour of Melissa's galas, and each Sunday brunch with them reminded me that authenticity tastes better than champagne fountains. One gray afternoon, as I was signing contracts in my office, Anthony knocked with an odd look. "Melissa Blake is in the lobby," he said carefully. I almost laughed, convinced I misheard, but moments later she stood in front of me. No couture gown, no entourage, just jeans, a sweater, and eyes that no longer carried smug superiority but something closer to regret. "I came to apologize," she said quietly, hands folded in her lap. She admitted the cruelty of uninviting me while keeping my money, admitted the pressure of her mother's voice and her own insecurity, admitted she had lost herself in the chase for status. Then she slid an envelope across my desk, a cashier's check for $65,000. "This should have been returned long ago. It's yours." For the first time since that nightmare, I saw her not as the villain of my story, but as another casualty of appearances. I accepted the check, thanked her for the honesty, and let her walk out of my office with her dignity intact. That evening, over dinner with James and Sarah, I told them what happened. James shook his head in wonder. Sarah squeezed his hand, and I realized something profound. Self-respect doesn't just reclaim your power. It can inspire others to face their truths too. What began as betrayal had become a lesson stitched into every choice I now made for my business, my family, myself. Boundaries weren't about exclusion, they were about protecting the love and loyalty that deserved to stay. When I look back now, the day that nearly broke me has become the day that remade me. The wedding that never was could have left nothing but bitterness. $65,000 gone, a brother lost to ambition, a family torn further apart. But instead, it became the catalyst that forced me to draw a line, to say enough, to choose dignity over silence. James and I rebuilt slowly. Sunday brunches turned into laughter-filled rituals again, reminders of fire escapes and childhood promises. He found joy in Sarah, a woman who valued him for his humor, his grit, his unpolished honesty, the very things Melissa had tried to file down. Watching them together healed something in me. It proved that love built on truth will always outlast love built on appearances. As for me, I turned pain into purpose. I created the True Love, True Values Fund, using Melissa's return check to help couples with real commitment afford weddings they deserved. Every time I watched a bride and groom walk through the Sapphire Grand's doors with nothing but genuine joy in their eyes, I felt a piece of my own story settle into peace. Even Melissa's unexpected visit reminded me that people can change when they finally face their reflection. She left me with an apology and proof that accountability can grow in the ashes of humiliation. And in that moment, I saw how even the people who hurt us can become mirrors, showing us who we refuse to become. The lesson carved into me that season is simple but eternal. You teach the world how to treat you by the boundaries you set. I had allowed myself to be diminished until the day I stood tall and said no. That no gave me back my brother, my self-respect, and the new compass for every choice I make. You cannot always control betrayal, but you can always control your response. And sometimes the bravest response is walking away from anything that asks you to be less than who you are. The morning of which should have been James's wedding anniversary, I stood on the balcony of the Sapphire Grand, coffee in hand, watching the city stir awake. A year earlier, that date had been circled in red on every calendar, the day my brother was meant to pledge his future to Melissa under crystal chandeliers and towering orchids. Instead, it had become the day he chose honesty over pretense. The day I chose boundaries over blind generosity. What felt like devastation then, now read like deliverance. James came by later with Sarah, his laughter echoing through the lobby as he carried a box of pastries. They were planning a simple garden ceremony of their own, intimate and real, with no illusions of grandeur. "Best woman," he said with a grin, placing the title squarely in my hands. Tears welled, not from sorrow but from gratitude that our bond had survived the fire. As I helped him straighten his tie months later, I saw in his eyes the boy who once promised me sandwiches, the man who almost lost himself, and the brother who finally found his way home. The lesson that anchored itself in me was one I now shared with every young woman I mentored. Success means nothing if it costs you your dignity, and family means nothing if it demands your silence. That $65,000 had once felt like the price of betrayal, but it became the seed of something greater, a fund for couples who valued love more than spectacle, and a reminder that true wealth is measured in integrity, not chandeliers. Standing there in the garden of my newest hotel, watching James slip a ring on Sarah's hand, I knew the disaster had written its own redemption. Out of arrogance grew humility. Out of betrayal grew boundaries, and out of a canceled wedding grew a story worth telling again and again. You are always enough as you are, and the moment you demand respect is the moment you begin to live free. The garden shimmered with late summer light when James and Sarah finally said their vows, a scene worlds away from the glittering spectacle Melissa once demanded. No chandeliers, no 10-tiered cake, no whispers of social status, just friends, family, and a love that rang true in every word they spoke. As James looked at Sarah, his voice steady and sure, I saw the boy who once swore he'd always protect me, now a man who had learned to protect his own heart as well. When it came time for me to give my speech as his best woman, I spoke not of the drama that nearly divided us, but of the resilience that brought us back together. I told the guests that true wealth isn't measured in diamonds or guest lists, but in loyalty that survives storms and in courage that says no when the price of yes is your self-respect. Later that night, as laughter carried across the garden and music floated under the stars, James leaned against the railing beside me. "You know," he said quietly, "if Melissa and I had gone through with that wedding, I don't think I'd even recognize myself today." I smiled, feeling the truth of it. Sometimes life saves us by breaking us first. We clinked our glasses not just in celebration of his new marriage, but in honor of every boundary set, every hard conversation faced, every moment of courage that had led to this peace. The story that began with betrayal and humiliation had come full circle, proving that even the deepest wounds can become the strongest foundations when healed with honesty and love. As the music faded and the last guests drifted home from James and Sarah's wedding, I stayed behind in the quiet garden, the scent of roses lingering in the warm night air. A year ago, I had stood in this same place preparing for a wedding that never happened, bracing myself against betrayal and humiliation. Tonight, I stood in the same soil, but with an entirely different heart, lighter, stronger, free. James joined me, his tie loosened, his eyes glowing with the kind of peace I had not seen in years. "Thank you, Nat," he said simply, "for everything, for saving me from the wrong path and for reminding me who I am." I hugged him tightly, remembering every moment we had leaned on each other since childhood, every coin counted on the bedroom floor, every Sunday brunch that kept us tethered through chaos. The past year had taught us both that family isn't about blood alone. It's about the courage to hold each other accountable, even when it hurts. Melissa's cruelty had exposed my own habit of giving until it hurt, but it also forced me to step into my power, to stop mistaking silence for strength. The $65,000 I once thought I had lost had returned to me, transformed into a fund that helped couples who value authenticity over spectacle. Even Melissa herself had faced her reflection and sought forgiveness, proof that growth sometimes blooms from ashes. Standing there in the glow of lanterns strung across the garden, I realized the true gift of that disastrous almost wedding. It gave me back my brother, it gave him a second chance at real love, and it gave me the unshakable knowledge that self-respect is the root of every healthy relationship. Betrayal had become a blessing, endings had become beginnings, and tonight the only thing left was gratitude. Because sometimes the worst heartbreaks lead us straight to the life we were always meant to live.